Week 8 is in the books, and we're taking a look at the Week 9 waiver wire. We got 13 players that you need to be either adding, dropping, or, we'll kind of just give our opinion on these guys. Dave, this is going to be a really interesting week. We got Halloween tomorrow, right? So there's a little bit of spookiness, some scariness, some mystery around this week.
Yeah.
You were on vacation, right? A kind of sort of vacation. You were in Texas. You told me you went to the Texas college football game.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
how old did you feel?
I felt very old, when you're like in your mid to late 20s, you can go to a college game and be like, yeah, I could still hang. I'm still young. I'm cool. Yeah, you go there in your mid 30s. Yeah, it was my younger brother is getting married in a little bit, and we had his bachelor party this weekend. So yeah, I've never felt like an older 33-year-old than I do this morning after being in a college town for a bachelor party over the weekend. So yeah, let's get after it. I'm feeling sharp as a tack today.
You're just walking around like, where are all your parents? What are you
Seriously?
doing? You're alone.
I was like, what are the laws in Texas? They like 12-year-olds drink beer at college games?
We need a chaperone at the stadium. All right. Well, I'm glad you had a fun weekend. Glad you're back with us. You've recovered in time to take a look at the Week 9 waiver wire ads. Why don't you kick us off with the first player? We're going to take a look at the running backs first. And this is a guy you've been touting all season, Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, and this is a guy I'm really happy to talk about. I'm glad we could start the show with him. He's still available in 70% of leagues. Like, he got dropped because of the injury. He got dropped because of the bye week, but we finally saw it yesterday. He out-snapped Kenneth Walker, and that is largely, obviously, in part due to Walker's limitations. We talked about it. He was did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday, and then somehow just came off the injury report. But clearly, he was limited there. I'm not saying that Zach Charbonnet has taken over this backfield, but we did see him with a much bigger role finally, where he has this hamstring injury behind him, and he looked great against a very, very good Cleveland defense. Averaged over 10 yards per carry in his touches. And on the season, this isn't a fluke. Like, he has been very, very good with his opportunities so far this year. He's averaging 5.8 yards per carry compared to Kenneth Walker's 4.4. He's averaging more yards after contact. He's averaging a higher missed tackle rate. He has more yards created per attempt. And they're seeing almost identical fronts when he's getting snaps. It's not like he's just playing against soft fronts late in games, kind of like Chase Edmonds did a few years ago in Arizona. Like, he is still seeing the same defensive fronts that Kenneth Walker is seeing, and he's been very, very good with his opportunities. So Charbonnet had a preseason shoulder injury, and then he had the midseason hamstring injury. We haven't really seen him find his footing yet in this offense, but I think he's starting to carve out a role in this offense. There could be a little bit of standalone value here, but really for me, he is just a much rostered or a must-add player, because we know that if Walker has to miss time, he has shown the chops to be a legitimate fantasy RB1.
Yeah, Charbonnet's a really good player. And I remember when he was coming out, I was comping him a lot to James Conner and the way he runs, but I think he's a little bit of a better receiver than James Conner.
Yeah.
And, we're starting to see that. I think that what was still a little bit annoying, right, if you've been waiting for the Zach Charbonnet breakout, was that Kenneth Walker came off the field with 10 minutes left and did not take another snap. And so, like you mentioned, how much of that is, trying to rest the injury, manage the reps. But I think that the underlying thing here is that we just could see the Seahawks start to manage the reps for all of these running backs. And even DJ Dallas was still getting some work in the receiving game there. So, Walker did start out great. Like, this is not like Ken Walker did bad, Zach Charbonnet did good. Both of these guys played really well against what should have been a very tough Cleveland Browns defense. And they both still pulled it out pretty well. Kenneth Walker finishes with 9 touches, Zach Charbonnet 7, and then you sprinkle in a little DJ Dallas in there somewhere. But the fantasy people don't care about that.
Pete Carroll's comments from midweek where he's saying, like, can't wait to get Kenny McIntosh. He's just going to bring another element to the offense. I mean, this is what Pete Carroll, like, you'd have to go back to the Marshawn Lynch days to see him really commit to one running back. He likes to have this kind of corral of running backs where he can deploy different guys. And we never really saw it with Rashad Penny and Chris Carson, because one of them was always hurt, so the other one was always kind of in this de facto RB1 role. But now if Charbonnet could stay healthy, if Walker could stay healthy, we know DJ Dallas isn't going anywhere. I think we might see a little bit more of a committee approach as we get towards the later weeks in the season.
I'm going to take a look at another guy here, running back, who I think he's got like one more legitimate week of value, and we'll see how much value it actually is. But it's Emari Demercado, running back for the Arizona Cardinals. still available in 62% of leagues. And it feels like he's kind of been an on and off waiver wire ad for the last few weeks here. It's been a little up and down. He was one of these guys that I called him a potential sleeper this past week as a starter, and he was okay. The Arizona Cardinals offense just kind of sputtered in general, unless your name was Trey McBride. But right now, we're at the point where Demercado owns this backfield until James Conner returns, and that could just be one more week until Conner is back. But 21 touches for Demercado against the Baltimore Ravens. Everything sort of changed in the fourth quarter, though. And this is something like there's good and there's bad, right? We want to be able to give you all sides as play devil's advocate. Things sort of changed in the fourth quarter where Keontae Ingram did start to get more of that work when the Cardinals went into panic mode and like, we've got to pass a lot more, which is odd because Demercado is a good passing downs back, and Keontae Ingram has never really been a guy that you like when you think of him, you go, ooh, that's a receiving back, right?
No.
So it's I don't know if it's been a pass blocking thing or what the idea was there. There could have been an injury with Demercado that still hasn't been reported yet. But I'll say this: the usage early on says good things for Demercado and this Cardinals offense, and then the rushing attack, it gives us a little bit more clarity. So if you do need sort of a desperate running back that you need to start, he's there and he's still available in over 60% of leagues. I will say week 9. Tough matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, but like we just talked about, the Browns allowed the Seahawks to run for nearly 7 yards per carry. And so when you got two guys able to go out there and run well, maybe there's some hope for Demercado next week if you need a guy to flex, or you're one of these like leagues where there's just not a lot of running backs left over. You've experienced a lot of injuries. I think he's a guy that you can plug into your lineup, Dave.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if I had to start one of these guys, it would be Demercado, but this Cardinals running back room is just so hard to get a read on. Like you said, like Keontae Ingram, you don't think of him as a passing down back whatsoever. He wasn't that in college. He hasn't been that so far in the NFL. And then he led the team. He had almost twice as many routes run as Demercado last week, which is Demercado's strength as a running back is in the passing game. So
yeah, I don't get it.
I wonder if some of this just has to do with Jonathan Gannon kind of being a first-year head coach, trying out some new things, hasn't really figured it out yet, because it is kind of head-scratching to see the deployment of these running backs. I think what we've seen, though, is that Keontae Ingram just isn't that effective. We had hopes that maybe he could stumble into a 3-down role with James Conner out of the picture, but I think that the guy with the most juice, the guy that can really get some of the high-value touches is Demercado. So if I had to pick one of these guys, it would be him. But also, don't be surprised if Keontae Ingram is like the lead guy next week and Demercado is nothing. This is a really, really tough backfield to get a read on.
It really is. And that's why I say like, he's not necessarily a must-add, but he's a guy that if you need someone, go ahead and add him, and he probably won't cost you all that much. Just understand.
We have bye weeks. Again next week, so we start getting desperate again really quickly.
Thanks a lot, NFL. By the way, speaking of doing that little thumbs up there, if you're enjoying this video, you're enjoying the content here, talking about the running backs and the rest of the Week 9 waiver wire ads that we've got here for you, please take a second to like this video here on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to the Football Guys YouTube channel. And then if you've got questions about your waiver wire, your roster, trades, anything, who to start, who to sit, drop those questions in the comments down below, and I do my best to get back to each and every one of those. Dave, speaking of likes, do you like my shirt today? For those of you who are not on YouTube and you're maybe listening, do you like my shirt, Dave? It's little skeletons with pumpkin heads. My mommy got it for me.
I like it. Yeah, it's very, very festive. Maybe we'll save the festive thigh tattoo I got for a different day.
That'll be for the special Halloween episode tomorrow. So tune in if you want to.
I'll wear some
Dave's
shorts
thigh.
And show it off.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, Dave's thigh. See you tomorrow, everybody. All right, let's take a look at the third and final running back waiver wire ad that we're looking at here. It's Devin Singletary for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, remember in the preseason when we saw this like 100% snap share in like back-to-back games, and we were all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about Dameon Pierce and, putting him into our, top 12. I mean, not us specifically, but just people in the fantasy industry were getting really, really excited about Dameon Pierce. Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
No more bushy tails.
No more bushy tails. No more bright eyes. Nope. Devin Singletary has essentially forced a 50-50 backfield split, but 50-50 kind of favoring Devin Singletary because he's getting the high value work. So if you look over the last 2 games that they played together, Devin Singletary has 22 carries. Dameon Pierce has 25. So slight edge to Dameon Pierce there, but Devin Singletary has 4 targets to Pierce's 0. He has 8 red zone touches to Pierce's 6. And I hate to say it, but Dameon Pierce has just looked awful. Like flat out awful.
Is he hurt? there's got to be something there that we don't know, that he might be hurt. I was watching him yesterday where he had multiple attempts at the goal line,
And just hitting the
and
wall.
yeah, and it's with the angles you can't always tell. It kind of
Right.
sort of looked like he was just running directly into his lineman, but it also feels like that's one of those runs last year that Dameon Pierce would have powered through, because he just
Yeah.
runs like a freight train, and he's just not doing that this year.
And I think last year, he was bad. If you looked at his efficiency metrics last year, he was bad. His overall body of work
The way
wasn't
you
great.
said that, if you look at last year, he was bad.
I mean, he was. And I think that we got maybe a little bit too deep into the highlights during the offseason, and we start looking at the angry runs, shout out Kyle Brandt, and Dameon Pierce had a lot of those, like where he was trucking through people, but he couldn't do it consistently. He'd have like one eye-popping run every single game, and then he'd have like 19. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you just falling down at the line of scrimmage? And now we aren't seeing those highlight runs, and it is turning into even worse efficiency. I mean, his yards per attempt is down, yards after contact, yards before contact, rushing yards over expectation, missed tackle rate, breakaway run rate, you name it. Almost every single efficiency metric has dipped significantly from last year into this year, and he's basically just played himself out of a job. So crazy as it sounds, Devin Singletary just looks like the better back right now. So if this is going to be a 50-50 split, but if Singletary is getting more of the passing down work and more of the red zone work, we might have to start talking, having a serious conversation about Devin Singletary being the more valuable running back over the rest of the season than Dameon Pierce.
Well, and that was going to be my question here is, we're never trying to predict injury, but saying without injury to Dameon Pierce, right? Is there perhaps a way here where Devin Singletary becomes the primary running back? I would think that if the struggles on the ground continue and the Texans continue to go into these tough matchups, there might be a bit more passing than we've seen in the past. And I think that kind of leans a bit more towards better usage for Devin Singletary, no?
Yeah, and I was beating the drum for Devin Singletary this offseason, and it wasn't something that I felt good about because he's not a great running back, but he does everything well. And like year after year, we saw this in Buffalo, where everybody would say, oh, Devin Singletary stinks. He's small and he's slow and he can't do this and he can't do that. But he maintained a pretty heavy workload in a good offense because he's the guy that isn't going to beat you. Like he's not going to beat his own team. He's not a liability in the run game. He's going to pick up the yards. He's going to hit the hole. He's going to do all the things that he's supposed to do. Where Dameon Pierce is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. He is a liability right now. They're giving him multiple touches at the goal line and he can't punch it in, where Devin Singletary might not have that breakaway speed to rip off an 80-yard touchdown. He might not truck through a defender, but he's going to get you 4 yards just about every single time he touches the ball. And that's why he had that nickname, Motor. Like, he just keeps it going and keeps it going. He doesn't have any, great aspects to his game, but he's good at just about every facet of his game.
Dave, are you ready to laugh a little bit? You want to hear who my comp was? A direct comp. And so it was 1 year after the other for college prospects coming out. Kyren Williams, I comped him to Devin Singletary, and their combine numbers were nearly identical in terms of height, weight, speed, everything.
Yeah,
and they're pretty similar guys.
Comp. Yeah, they can do what they need to in the passing game. Like, they're not great at anything, but they're good enough at everything.
Can't wait for all the angry Kyren Williams people in the comments. By the way, just a totally non-waiver wire talk here. The Rams said they have not ruled out putting Matt Stafford on IR to miss 4 weeks. That is very concerning for any Rams players that you have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll probably talk more about that tomorrow, because tomorrow's theme is fun. Tomorrow's theme is scariest situations here in fantasy football. Halloween.
And Stetson Bennett starting the rest of the season in Los Angeles would be pretty scary.
Terrifying. All right, Dave. So out of these 3 running backs that we took a look at here, took a look at Devin Singletary, Zach Charbonnet, Emari Demercado. I think I know the answer to this, but I got to ask, who is your priority running back pickup between the 3 of them?
You already know. It's Zach Charbonnet. I mean, the guy's got hopefully some standalone value, but really it's the contingent upside here. Like, even if Dameon Pierce gets hurt, cool, we're looking at Devin Singletary as kind of a low-end RB2 in this offense. And even if Keontae Ingram gets hurt, we're kind of looking at the same with Emari Demercado. For me, I'm looking for the high-end range of outcomes. And if something happens to Kenneth Walker, we're looking at top 5, top 10, top 12, whatever you want to call it. We're looking at very high-end production for Charbonnet.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. Let's move along to the wide receivers here, where we've got three more players that we're going to take a look at. And Dave, why don't you hit us with the first guy that I think is going to be in a lot of waiver wire columns this week and a lot of posts on social media, because Brandin Cooks has had two back-to-back good games, but I think we got to dig a little deeper here. No, Dave?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about this one. It's a pretty thin wide receiver week, if I'm being honest. There's some good running backs, some good quarterbacks, some good tight ends. But as far as wide receivers, I actually like the deeper guy that I'm talking about in deep leagues after this. Brandin Cooks, though, he still might be available in some leagues out there. This Dallas offense is starting to hum. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. And this kind of made me laugh. I was going to say, like, oh, he has 4+ targets in every game this year, but he has seen exactly four
Yes.
targets in five
Yes.
of 6 games. I mean, he's only exceeded the 4 number once in a game where he saw 7 targets. So, like I said, not too crazy about Brandin Cooks because the yardage and the volume hasn't really been there, but Dak Prescott is looking his way when they get near the end zone, and this Dallas offense seems like it's going to have a lot to go around. So hopefully we can see Brandin Cooks expand his usage a little bit, but he's definitely worth a speculative pickup and stash for now in case he can put it together. Another guy who kind of dealt with some injuries, got off to a slow start this year, and hopefully can cement himself a little bit deeper in this offense.
Yeah, with Brandin Cooks, I think you mentioned the trend, right, of 4 targets in basically every single game but
Yeah.
one. What's worried me is that over the last 4 weeks, we've started to see that target share shrink a bit more, and the target share is going up for Michael Gallup, who hasn't been productive, but I think that's even worse, that the guy who's getting more targets isn't productive, and then the guy I just there's not a lot here in this offense. So I do get it, maybe Dak Prescott continues to improve, but I
Gallup
this is
Gallup just
this is
hasn't looked right since that ACL, man. Like before
no,
the ACL tear,
no.
Michael Gallup was looking like he could be a team's wide receiver one. Like I was talking about him like he was a top 15, top 20 talent in the league, and that ACL just set him back so far. And maybe that's the thing when you're one of those big-bodied types of receivers. I mean, it took Cortland Sutton over 2 years to kind of look like his old self again. So I think Michael Gallup is one of those guys looking like ahead at like 2024 leagues that I might be in on because he just hasn't looked right this year.
This whole Cowboys offense though hasn't really looked right. I mean, there's just been weirdness with Tony Pollard, weirdness in and out of games with CD Lamb, who blew up this past week. It's just if you are going out there and picking up a guy like Brandin Cooks, just kind of understand what you're getting yourself into. He's one of those.
Mhm.
I don't even know if we want to call him safe, but he's just kind of a ho hum wide receiver 4. I think
Yeah,
that's a pretty fair way to categorize him at this point.
right.
By the way, one guy we did not talk about from that Cowboys offense, Jake Ferguson, my guy,
Finally
had
found the end
himself
zone on a
had
big one.
himself
Yeah.
nice week. We don't talk about him here in this episode for the tight ends, so he's just too highly rostered at this point. But if he's available,
Right.
go on, get Jake Ferguson. All right, I'm going to go to the next wide receiver here, and I'm talking about Rashid Shaheed, wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. And Dave, I swear to all of the Halloween gods that there are out there that if just Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave could each become one wide receiver, Derek Carr would actually get him the ball. It would be just remarkable. It's the weirdest thing, man. And Olave keeps getting targeted, but there's a chemistry issue. Like you and I were
Mhm.
joking before the show. It's kind of like you have these two friends, and you're like, oh, they'd be perfect to date each other. They like all the same things, and it just doesn't matter because the chemistry's not there. Derek Carr loves to throw the deep ball. Chris Olave is good at catching the deep ball, and for some reason, it's not working out. But Rashid Shaheed, he's been incredibly efficient throughout this year. Another really efficient performance this past week. 3 catches for 153 yards, a touchdown. He's been a top 12 wide receiver in 2 of the last 3 weeks while only catching 5 total passes, 5 passes in 3 weeks. Just insane efficiency numbers here for Rashid Shaheed. He's got a league leading 20.8 yards per route run, and he's number
Whew.
2 in yards per target. It's absolutely insane what he's doing. I'm not going to say like, hey, this is something that he can continue to sustain and something he's going to keep doing, but we are seeing a very distinct connection with him and Derek Carr. Derek Carr even he posted on Instagram. I'm not out there creeping. I'm just saying it was on social media. You put it out into the world wide webs. It's there, but it's a post of him, Derek Carr, about to launch a football, and he captioned it at the bottom with at Rashid Shaheed down there somewhere.
Ugh.
I mean, I use the
Shots
dating.
fired at Chris Olave.
I use the dating metaphor, but this is very much like a couple that first starts dating, and you're posting pictures of each other with corny quotes and things like. That's what's going on with Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed. There's a beautiful relationship here blossoming.
Since we're diving into some social
Yeah.
media narratives real quickly,
Oh,
did
boy.
you also see the one where Jacksonville Jaguars had a player mic'd up and they caught Derek Carr cussing out Chris Olave for giving up on a route?
No. Again?
Yeah. Well, just from last week's game, there was a play where Chris
Oh,
Olave,
yeah.
he
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to be running a route. He was like the third or fourth read, so he just kind of gave up, and then Derek Carr sailed over his head and starts yelling and was
Yeah.
pretty
Derek Carr
mad
threw that
at
ball.
Chris Olave. Yeah.
Yeah. He threw that ball like 8 yards out of bounds. And so, like, to avoid people noticing that I threw the ball into the stands, I'm going to go and yell at the wide receiver who wasn't even the third option on that. Like, Michael Thomas came out and put context to it, and he's like,
I saw.
no. He's like, no, Chris wasn't even supposed to be running around. He's just supposed to be clearing out for us. Like, he's never intended to get that ball. There's just weird stuff. Weird stuff. A poor relationship right now between Derek Carr and Chris Olave. I hate it. I hate it. It sucks so much. It makes me so sad. But looking at this Saints team with Rashid Shaheed, who we're talking about here as the waiver wire potential add, since week 4, since the return of Alvin Kamara, and we've kind of seen what this team has become. Shaheed's been 4th in targets on the team, so he's not like commanding a big target share, but he's 1st in receiving yards by nearly 60 yards. I'm sure this week helped out a lot, but I think he's worth a roster spot, Dave. I think that the Saints, he's worth the roster spot because the Saints have a nice remaining schedule. You never wish for it or try to predict it, but if something were to happen to Chris Olave or Michael Thomas, who's got himself a spotty medical history to begin with, Rashid Shaheed's value would only increase. And if he's doing this now with a small amount of targets, small amount of receptions, I don't think the efficiency stays, but once we start to see that volume go up, I don't know, Rashid Shaheed actually becomes a guy that he's a high upside wide receiver 3 or 4. I think I'd rather have him over Brandin Cooks.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And when we do the show, we go down rostership is how we kind of sort these guys out.
Not in priority order.
Right. I would absolutely prefer Rashid Shaheed over Brandin Cooks. And I just want to shout out Matt Waldman, a fellow football guy. He's been on the show a few times, does great work. He wrote an article on June 15th, way early in the preseason, not even preseason, off season, when a lot of people weren't even paying attention to fantasy football yet. And he wrote an entire article, thousands of words, saying, is Rashid Shaheed the key to the Saints' success? And starts it off saying, do you really think that I'd write a feature about Rashid Shaheed having fantasy success? Come on now. Shaheed was a rookie undrafted free agent with 28 catches and 2 touchdowns in 11 games. Does that sound like a player who's a vital part of an offensive puzzle? And then goes on to write a few thousand words about how he would be. So huge shout out to Matt Waldman for calling this one back in June after studying the tape. Rashid Shaheed is a very, very good football player.
Man, Matt Waldman with the article swerve. Also, thousands upon thousands of words.
Thousands.
I could never. My articles are about 30 words, and they're all bullet pointed. So you're welcome, audience. All right, Dave, hit us with the last wide receiver waiver wire ad that we're looking at here.
Now we're getting to your deep leagues here. This guy's going to be available in almost every league out there, but I think it's time that we take a look at Khalil Shakir. He had 6 targets last week. That was his season high. You probably watched that Thursday Night Football game. Really fun and exciting game there. And it might look like a fluke, and you might just say, well, this guy hasn't really done anything all season, but he doubled his season high snap share in this game. And with Dawson Knox on IR, bear with me for a second. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here.
I love stories.
We know that Dawson Knox being out is good for Dalton Kincaid. I mean, we saw it immediately in last week's game. Dalton Kincaid was a full-time player, looked great, drawing a ton of targets. But this is also sneaky good news for Khalil Shakir. Shakir is graded as one of the best blocking wide receivers in the league. Now, Kincaid was the route runner. Dawson Knox was the blocker. Now we're going to see Khalil Shakir on the field more often because of his abilities as a blocker. More snaps lead to more routes run lead to more targets. And Khalil Shakir, even though he is a good blocker, he's also a very good route runner. 85th percentile speed. He's got some great footwork as well. He can also get deep and make some big plays. So again, very deep ad here, but I think that he is worth a stash because he's a very explosive player on a good offense who now, with Dawson Knox out, could see himself in what could end up being pretty close to a full-time role. They're going to start running more 11 personnel. Shakir is going to be on the field more often, and he could easily find himself 3rd or 4th in the pecking order in targets.
Yeah, for those of you listening at home, you're watching on YouTube, and you're what's 11 personnel? What does that mean? They always have 11 people in the field, right? 11 personnel refers to one tight end and one running back, meaning you're going to have three wide receivers out there on the field, and Khalil Shakir becomes that third wide receiver. And
Yep.
I don't think, and Dave, I mean, we could run through this roster, but I don't think there's anyone else that's going to be beating him out for those slot wide receiver snaps at this point. Deontay Hardy's not that guy. Uh, I can't, what Trent Sherfield, like that's not happening. We
Not
have
bringing
seen
Cole
though.
Beasley back at this point.
No, but you know what? You bring up a good point though, is that this slot wide receiver role for the Bills, and specifically with Josh
Consistently
Allen,
pulling 100+ targets when Cole Beasley was there.
it's been very valuable. And I think that was one of the talking points for so many people as to why you go out and draft Dalton Kincaid. He's not your traditional tight end. They're going to use him in the slot role. And now we're seeing, because of no Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid is getting that traditional tight end role. They're still moving him around plenty, but this opens up the door for Khalil Shakir, who has
Yep.
quietly, and this is a thing too, is that it's not totally dependent on Dawson Knox being out of the lineup. We've seen the snap share kind of continually increase for Khalil Shakir, the targets increase for Khalil Shakir, and the receptions, everything. He had the nice blow up game. Sometimes we just see this, Dave. Like once a player does well, it's hard to go and sit them back on the shelf.
Genie's
And
out of the bottle.
the cat's out of the bottle. Genie's out of the bag, man. All right. So amongst these three guys, Khalil Shakir, Brandin Cooks, Rashid Shaheed, who would be your top waiver wire ad going into week 9?
Rashid Shaheed. I mean, he's a guy that if you got some wide receivers on bye, you might even be looking at him as a flex play as early as week 9. So for me, it's Shaheed. I think he's got the highest ceiling of the bunch and also probably the safest floor.
Yeah, I think I'm with you once again there. We're talking about both these guys that we've talked about, where we've made them the priority, Zach Charbonnet, Rashid Shaheed. It's because they offer you a decent floor, some contingency upside, but also just a really, really high ceiling if they are to get more work. And we're getting to that point of the season where that's what you're starting to do, is hold on to these guys that might be able to give you a bit more value down the road towards the playoffs, stuff like that. All right, let's get to the tight end position where we got two guys here. One of them, I just love this. I just love this so much. Taysom Hill, quote, tight end for the New Orleans Saints. Still think he might be the best running back on that team. But talk to me about Taysom Hill.
Seriously. And then he's seeing his snaps go up. He's seeing not quite a full-time role, but as close to a full-time role as we have ever seen Taysom Hill have in New Orleans. He had a season-high 37 pass snaps in week 6, and then eclipsed that with 44 passing snaps in week 7. And we said, awesome, like he's a full-time tight end. And then in week 8, he saw a season-high 9 rushing attempts. So it's kind of weird. I mean, they are just using him in this role where they are just doing whatever they can to get him on the field. Sometimes it's as a passer, sometimes it's as a rusher, sometimes it's as a receiver. I just like to see that they are getting very creative with their usage for Taysom Hill. And however they get him on the field, he finds ways to keep producing. He has a double-digit fantasy points in 3 straight weeks and has a sky-high ceiling. There are very few fantasy tight ends that can give you a 20, 25-point week, and you get that with Taysom Hill. At this point, I mean, I ranked him as my tight end 9 last week. I ranked him as my tight end, or I'm sorry, my tight end 9 2 weeks ago. Had him as my tight end 7 last week. When you get outside of that elite-ish tier, Travis Kelce, Mark
Elite-ish.
Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, you get through like the top 6, top 7 tight ends. I prefer Taysom Hill over all of the rest of the bunch. He's a guy that, you're going to have some lows and you got to ride through it, but I'm starting Taysom Hill every single week if I don't have a top 5, top 6 tight end.
Well, so that's actually what I was going to ask you. You're reading my mind, dude. Tight ends. So obviously you're starting Travis Kelce over him,
Yep.
Mark Andrews over him, TJ Hawkinson. I would assume.
I think
right?
he's kind of in that like the back end of like the Kittle, Waller. He's kind of in that tier. I mean, with the usage that he's getting and with the ceiling he has, I prefer those guys ahead of him. But when Dalton Kincaid maybe in that same tier, and I think that's kind of where he fits in, like tight end 6, tight end 7 for the rest of the season.
I was gonna say, can we play a game here? Let's play a game here with some names. So actually, Darren Waller, we got to be careful there. Talking with
Hamstring.
Dr. David Chow, yeah, there's a possibility he might go on IR for 4 weeks and potentially beyond. So that's one where I think maybe if you had Darren Waller as your tight end, you need to go pony up some dough for a guy like Taysom Hill or the next tight end that we're about to talk about. But let's play a little game here, okay? Sam Laporta or Taysom Hill?
Laporta.
Okay, George Kittle or Taysom Hill?
Kittle, but you wouldn't have to twist my arm to put
It's
Taysom Hill ahead
closer.
once
It's
Deebo
closer
Samuel
than we'd
comes back.
expect.
Yeah, right now we're seeing Kittle get the touches because Deebo has been hurt or limited. But once Deebo's back, we know that is bad news for George Kittle. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where he's at, is in that like Kittle tier for me.
Dallas Goedert or Taysom
I'd,
Hill?
I'd prefer Taysom Hill over Goddard.
Evan Ingram?
I'll give it to Evan Ingram. I think he's pulling like 8.2 targets per game or something like that, but it's close.
Because he gets 9 receptions and 12 yards per game.
Yeah, right.
He's awesome for PPR. Dalton Kincaid or Taysom Hill?
Dalton Kincaid, but again, it's really, really close. Like those guys are all kind of bunched together. Those like middling tight end ones, like outside of Kelsey, Andrews, and Hawkinson, it gets really flat with everybody else, and Taysom Hill is in that discussion every week.
And I want to say this last one just for the production value of it. Kyle Pitts or Taysom Hill?
I easily prefer Taysom Hill ahead of Kyle Pitts for the rest of the season. Crazy to say.
There we go. Welcome to week 9, everybody. It's weird out here. All right, I'm going to give you the next tight end waiver wire ad that we're looking at, and it's Trey McBride for the Arizona Cardinals, and he's still available in 93% of leagues. Honestly, I'm surprised because I would have thought more people would be getting ahead of this, especially with Zach Ertz going to IR, Trey McBride's role continuing to grow, and with how bad tight end has been, unless you had one of those top 5, 6, 7 guys, I would assume you're out there looking for someone to jump in. A lot of people jumped in on Michael Mayer, but not yet on Trey McBride. And it's weird. This is a young, talented player with a good draft pedigree, potential now to be a top 12 guy, I think, each week. Mm-hmm. He had a 39% target per route run rate, which for those of you who are just not familiar with that kind of stat, that's very, very, very good. He's actually on the season. He's 5th in the NFL amongst qualifying tight ends to run at least 25 routes. And you know who's 6th, Dave? Zach Ertz, his teammate who is now on IR. So you're telling me that there's a guy who's already 5th in the NFL in targets per route run, and then his teammate who was 6th is now going to IR. And then on top of that, you're telling me the Cardinals might get back their starting quarterback who is considerably better than Josh Dobbs and Kyler Murray.
The brakes there. We don't know what's happening with the. I'm just saying he might be getting traded. I mean, it seems like Jonathan Gannon loves Josh Dobbs. He already committed to Josh Dobbs next week, so that we're still looking at Kyler Murray, but Josh Dobbs is our starter, and he's got the utmost confidence in him.
I think that's more of an injury thing than a trading.
I just want it on the record: Kyler Murray in Minnesota. Just saying.
And the show has come to a screeching halt. You know what? I prefer that over everyone else still reaching deep into their bag saying Minnesota needs to trade for Trey Lance.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
Enough
I can't.
Of that.
All right, enough. Yeah.
Enough. Let's move on. Let me finish up here with Trey McBride. Dave, we really like him. We've talked about him for a couple weeks here. And one of the things that I think continues to be a big positive for Trey McBride is not just the way he's getting targeted, but what he can do after the catch. He's always been a good yards after catch guy, even coming out of Colorado State. And we saw it this past week with his touchdown. It was something where he was able to catch the ball and really push through multiple defenders to get into the end zone. So, Dave, if you have to choose, okay. And I once again, I think I kind of know the answer here between Taysom Hill or Trey McBride. Would you want to lean more towards the traditional tight end that's getting a lot of the targets? And maybe let's say it's a safer, like a more better consistency out of the tight end position, we assume. Or do you want that volatility of a tight end that might get you 20 points because he's getting, 2 rushing touchdowns?
I think I'd go with Taysom Hill here, but it's close. I mean, Trey McBride, I'm looking at him as a top 10 tight end for the rest of the season. We talked about him in the waiver show last week with Joey Wright, and that was before Zach Ertz even hit IR. I wrote about Zach Ertz trending down, and then he hit IR the next day, and I just looked like a huge jerk for, poo-pooing all over Zach Ertz before he got hurt. But, the writing... The writing was on the wall before the Zach Ertz injury. Like, we saw the changing of the guard happening for the 3 weeks leading up to Zach Ertz's injury. Trey McBride was my start of the week last week. I mean, he is a fantastic player. I got to see him up close and personal in the flesh at CSU's Pro Day last year, and I was just blown away for how big he is and how quick he can move. I mean, he is a great, great athlete, and now the opportunity is there. I mean, it's crazy to me that Trey McBride is still available. He should have been picked up before this week. Now, after he had that touchdown where he dragged like 12 guys into the end zone with him. It was like both teams just met up at the 3-yard line and pushed into the end zone. It's going to be pretty tough. You're going to have to drop some fab on Trey McBride, but he is, just a must-add player in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we might be seeing the start of a breakout for a player, and I'd rather be wrong. I'd rather go out and spend the fab to get the tight end that might break out. And okay, I'm wrong. Whatever. I'm right back to where I was, the tight end position, which stinks all the way around. But if I'm right, now all of a sudden that fantasy team that needs that little extra push at the tight end position, all of a sudden a contender in my league. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's where I'm at with him. Quarterback, there's not a whole lot, but I will say there's one guy who just kind of consistently keeps performing, whether we like it or not, and it's Sam Howell of the Washington Commanders.
I think this is the fourth straight week that we've talked about Sam Howell on this show now. Like, for some reason, people still
And
aren't
no one
picking him up.
cares.
And we just keep telling you to pick him up. Had a really tough matchup this week, which is probably why he didn't see his roster ship budget all, but put up 32 points. Like, Monday Night Pending, he is the QB1 from week 8. He's the QB8 on the season. He has had 16 plus points in 6 of 8 outings so far this season. I'm going to keep it short. That's pretty much all I got. Like, he is putting up points every single week. I compared him to Blake Bortles kind of tongue-in-cheek a few weeks ago, but that was disrespectful to Blake Bortles, man. Sam Howell can ball. Pick this guy up and play him as a QB1 if you're hurting.
Wait, you mean it was disrespectful to Sam Howell because he can ball?
Yes, it was disrespectful to
yeah.
Sam Howell. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we can say that Sam Howell is probably a better quarterback than Blake Bortles was during his Jacksonville years.
And I will say this, man, it's still so similar because he's putting up the fantasy numbers, but the Commanders aren't winning, but the games are close. And that's the thing. It's like, as long as these games stay close, that Commanders defense can't stop anyone, at least through the secondary. And as long as that keeps going, we're going to see more and more passing from Sam Howell. And Terry McLaurin is actually becoming a legitimately, I want to say, viable starter for fantasy. Like, you can trust him. Not that he ever wasn't good, but
Dotson was top 10 on the week last week.
Sam
Howell he resuscitated Jamison Williams. Jamison Crowder. He made Jamison
I was
Crowder.
like, whoa.
He made Jamison Crowder a top 20 wide receiver last week. I mean, if Sam Howell can bring Jamison Crowder back to life, what can't he do?
The ever powerful Sam Howell. Well, we've hit our week 9 waiver wire ads for the week. Players that we're, maybe adding or not here at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback position. Now we're going to move on to the players that you can drop in your leagues, because this is always the tough part, right? You always have that FOMO, that fear of missing out. If I drop this guy, is he going to continue to play well? And, if I drop this player and pick up one of these guys, am I making the wrong decision? We're going to cover you on that. But we're going to continue that conversation over on the audio version of this show. And I've seen it in the comments. Some of you are like, what? Audio version only? That's stupid. I promise you, it's super easy. Just click the link in the description. Okay. And it's going to be just like another 15 minutes. We're going to talk about 4 players that you can drop. All you have to do is click that link in the description. And if you enjoy it, and if this was helpful for you at all, please subscribe to the show, leave a review for us. And actually, what we're doing right now, okay, is when you leave a review, drop in your idea for a show that you'd like to see us do. Okay, a topic as we get later on in the year here, right? Because we're going to go past the fantasy football trade deadline. There's only so many times you can say this player's got a great strength of schedule here for the fantasy playoffs. So we'd love to hear your ideas. What do you want to hear from us going forward in the fantasy season? We'd love to help you out with that. Leave that in a review, screenshot that, and send that over to Kluge at Football Guys, Kluge at Football Guys. And the best idea is going to automatically get a bid for next year's Listener League, and we'll include you in that in our 12-team Listener League. Well, Dave, we did it. Week 9 waiver wire is all done. We're going to catch you guys over on the audio side of this show. We'll see you next time. Adios.